Today's guest is Daniel Schuler, an identity coach who has spent the last 7 years working with over 1,000 people, from 11-year-olds to 73-year-olds, military personnel, and 9-figure executives, athletes at every level, teachers, students, people in the middle of breakups, as well as breakdowns. Daniel's work is simple on the surface and devastating underneath. He breaks false narratives and enables change that actually sticks because it comes from true identity. So this conversation today is about belief, identity, and why everything in your life flows downstream from what you think you are. So Daniel, welcome to the show, brother.
What's going on, man? So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. And for the audience that might not know, I've known Daniel for over a decade. We go back to like the teenage years. And it's so funny because I'm from Pennsylvania originally. Daniel's originally from Oregon. And the way we connected is just God sent, I guess you can say. Definitely somebody that I value big time in my life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the show. But Daniel, so most people think their problems are about discipline, motivation, or circumstances.
Yeah.
But what if none of that is actually the root issue? What if every bad decision, every broken pattern, every self-sabotage comes down to one thing: what you believe about who you are? So let me ask you right now, okay? Do you actually know who you are? Or are you living out a story that maybe somebody else has written for you in life? What would you say to that?
It's funny. I do know who I am. I think part of identity is, even from knowing your true identity, there's this ebb and flow throughout the day where the decisions that you make are based off of what you believe. So when I'm going through, 12, 13, 14, 15-hour day, some of the decisions I make will be based off of a story that someone else told me at some point. So I do know my identity, but it's not like you figure out your true identity and then you never live in the false again. The true identity is the anchor that you move from. And so when you're moving from it, you'll know when you're outside of it. And so I do know who I am, thankfully. I have what I believe God has called me by name, which we can get into at another point. I believe that everybody has a name in the kingdom of God, and it's not Nate, my podcast host and my entrepreneur, and Daniel, my identity coach. There's a very specific name that he gives us. And, I definitely do believe that I have mine, and I live from that as best as I can every day. But I think to sort of answer the question non-directly, because I don't think it's an either or, I think it's a both and part of doing this work is the discernment to know, okay, when I made this decision, even though I had my true identity, I was believing something else. So what was I believing in that moment? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I think too, you have people in life where they're working, let's say, a 9-to-5 job, and that's all they've known ever since they were a teenager. Their family grew up working a 9-to-5 job, but they're absolutely miserable with their life. And they feel as if they can't get out working the exact same job. So what would you say to somebody that is just consistently grinding in and day out, year after year, month after month, day after day. And they're just like, man, this is my identity. I can't get out of this identity, Daniel. So like, what would you say are some action steps for somebody that they're not fulfilled in their life and their identity is strictly their job? Let's say they're married, they have kids, and they have the family that they want, but they're not even happy because of the current job that they have. I feel that a lot of people struggle in life with this because they feel as if they can't get out of the rat race. Do they have to make a change? How do they make a change?
Yeah. No, that's really good. And what I start by telling people is, you don't do this work so that your circumstances change. You do it so that they don't have to. Right. So you don't do this work to go and build that business and get out of the proverbial rat race or whatever it is. If that is what you end up doing, then that's great. But I think what happens is there's this other false narrative around work where, like, true freedom is working for yourself. And there are a lot of people who are free and enjoy their 9 to 5 and enjoy their family and enjoy their home and enjoy their kids and all these things. And so I think because of social media, because of these influences, we start to believe that it's not enough. And so a lot of unhappiness or discontentment comes from the learned belief that what you have, who you are, and what you're experiencing isn't enough. But it just isn't enough a lot of the time in comparison to what you're seeing other people experience. So to someone listening to this, if they're like, okay, well, if I change my identity, can I change my life? And I would say yes, but there's a nuance because you have to now define what changing your life looks like. Now, the cool thing that happens is there will be people who are quote unquote, stuck in the rat race, let's say, or they're unhappy in their job or whatever it is. And a lot of the time it's because what they believed it would mean when they started. And so they're like, oh, when I get married, this is what it means. When I get a job, this is what it means. When I have kids, this is what it means. And if it's not equaling what they thought it was going to mean, that's where the unhappiness is. So it's recalibrating your entire belief system, right? Because when we look at behavior and results and all these things, that is a result of what you believed right before you did it. And so if you're living in this mindset of scarcity and lack and not enough and seeking other things, and it might cause someone to quit their job. It might cause someone to, whatever it is. But I think at the end of the day, it is, how do I frame who I am to change the way that I'm looking at these circumstances, rather than, oh, I'm stuck in this rat race, to, wow, I'm so thankful that I have a secure job. How can I be the very best at this job for as long as it requires me to work here? And if I really do want to quit, then how can I be the best employee that I could be while looking for something else? But that something else, like, as you know, as an entrepreneur, we're in our own rat race of our own. It's a blessing to make your schedule, but it's also a challenge to make your own schedule because you can do whatever you want. So as an entrepreneur, you're experiencing the results of your habits. So it's not like one is quote unquote better than the other. It's just different. And then how you look at it changes.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially being an entrepreneur. People, they want the lifestyle, but there's some days where if you work from home, well, you can either become lazy at home and not really go out and do too much, or you can actually work like you're supposed to do, being a business owner or an entrepreneur. And I think that's the difference from having a job. Is like, well, you got a boss, you're forced to work whatever tasks, the amount of hours, if you got to put in overtime that you need to do,
Yeah.
versus if you're working from home and you're working mobile, is what they call it, like remote, I guess. It's funny because they call it remote because you can either turn on the switch or turn it off on the
Yeah.
remote. Same with
Yeah.
same with you
Yeah.
and the effort that you put in. So it's
100%.
interesting. Where would you say, like, where do these false narratives come from, right? Who writes them? Is it wired within our DNA that we're born and we have false narratives? Does it come from how we were raised? Does it come from who we hang out around? Is it just work based? Is it relationship based? Where does it come from?
Yes. It's all the above, and I think working with as many people as I've worked with, I can obviously see trends and patterns, and typically they're learned before age 14, even younger. I use 14 to be safe, but it's mostly before age 10. And what happens is think about when you're a kid and you're playing sports or you're in school and you ask, why do I have to do this? And they say, because I'm your mom, because I'm your dad, because I'm your teacher, because I'm this. And you learn that questions to authority are met with resistance. And so then you learn maybe you're not enough or your questions aren't important. And it's not bad or good. For example, when I was growing up, I was a golfer and I played competitive golf for 15 years. I wanted to go play in college. I want to play pro, all these things. And my coach would tell me, you're going to go pro. Other people would say, you're going to do this. And that's an encouraging statement. The longer it doesn't happen, the more of a lie it becomes. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, someone in authority in my industry is telling me what I can do, and it's not happening. So there must be something wrong with me. And so we learn these either by experience or observation. A big one is money. So when you grow up in the home, if you hear talks about money and there's usually yelling or fighting, and you're just a kid and you're observing this, and then you notice there's a big money talk, and then you don't have dinner that night. And you're like, okay, there's not enough. And then the next morning, your lights aren't turning on in the house, and there's another money talk. So you learn money is bad, money is yelling. And so then what do? You pursue money your whole life because you want to avoid that at all costs. And so then that's how your narrative of money forms, because you don't leave the womb going, I'm welcome to the world, I'm unworthy. It's
Right.
you're only born with two fears, and then everything else, we develop and we learn. And so it can come from a single sentence someone says to you. It can come from a series of experienced events in a certain field. And then what happens is we will learn these before we're able to cognitively understand what's actually going on. So by the time that we can build our own truth, if you will, we're building it off of a lie, which is why the whole my truth movement really pisses me off. Is because we're not asking the question of, okay, I can understand that this is your truth, but where did you learn that? And is that actually true? Or is that only true because of the lie that you were told, or the lie that you started believing? So it's your truth, but is it the truth?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I feel that a lot of us are living false truths because of the way that we were brought up and raised. And you used money as an example. Well, Daniel, I can't get a break, man. Like I barely earn over 40,000 in a year.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me. It's hard for my family. I was raised out of poverty. I came from, let's just say, the hood or the slums to where we barely had anything. So I've never had a book. I've never had a mentor. I've never had a speaker to listen to. And I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to start. Like all these guys want to take my money. Like they
Yeah.
offer all these coaching programs, and everybody wants to just take the debit card and just swipe it. So I have a negative connotation towards that. And there's nobody that I can look to. So if I have that mindset, it's a negative mindset, but can you blame them if that's what they've been accustomed to with how they've been brought up? It's like, no, boy, you ain't gonna ever pay any money to somebody to learn the ins and outs and the ropes on actually achieving financial freedom. You're not
Yeah.
gonna ever spend a dime or a nickel or spend the time, because that's what my mom, that's what my dad, or maybe I didn't have any parents and maybe I grew up in a foster home. So
Yeah.
so someone like that who has that negative connotation, what barrier do they need to break through to
Yeah.
to get out of that mindset to where it's like, hey, take a deep breath, it's okay, like
Yeah.
you can totally seek out help, right? Like
Yeah.
what would they need to do?
Yeah. I think, to your point, I do want to make it very clear that I'm not saying that what people believe to be true isn't important or real, right? So they are in real time experiencing a product of the narrative that they're having. So it very well could be true that he is making that much a year. He was raised that way. He was told those lies. He was told those things. The problem that he's experiencing, he is now in agreement that is his story forever. So I talk about this a lot, the difference between victim and victimhood, right? So I have worked with a lot of victims of various things, verbal abuse, physical abuse, you know, everything like that, adoption, whatever it is. And no one will ever take away from the fact that you were a victim of something. And people sometimes are even victims of their own circumstances that they created. So now you're sitting in the afterglow of a consequence. You're sitting in a consequence in light of something that you've done. So you're a victim of what you've done. Now, that is true, but that does not equal your meaning. That does not equal your identity. That does not equal your trajectory. So that's what we work on. So I could say, in light of all those things happening, what is true about you regardless of those things? And they might say, I am someone who figures it out. I am someone who pays my bills on time. I am someone who's diligent. And then from there, we go, what does that allow you to do in the life that you currently have? Because I think what happens is a lot of coaches, a lot of these programs, they pull you towards the hope of new circumstances. They pull you towards, as long as you have the right mindset, you can achieve anything. That is such BS, man. It's true in the sense that it could happen, but you rewire their narrative to learn, if you don't experience that, I'm doing something wrong, therefore there's something wrong with me. So the place that they went to get the truth, they actually learned their next false narrative. And so this is why identity is so important, is because when I work with people, it's, it's not, okay, how do we get it? How do we get you out of this situation? It's, if this situation never changes, who do you know that you can be regardless of if it changes or not? Because that is how you experience confidence and discipline. That gives you the strength you need to get through those hard times. Because someone might come to me and their income might never change. Their family life might not change. Their situation might not change, but they change. And that's where true breakthrough happens.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned verbal abuse and physical abuse. Which one's worse, verbal abuse or physical abuse? And I know they're in separate arenas, but you got a lot of people that have went through verbal abuse, and unfortunately, you got a lot of people that have been through physical abuse. With the clients that you've worked with over the years, what have you noticed with each one?
Typically, they're associated with each other. Like, you usually don't have physical abuse without verbal abuse, but it is possible to experience verbal abuse without physical abuse. So if someone is physically hurting you, they're probably saying some things. They're not doing it quietly. And so those are usually together. The other thing is your body remembers. And so what will happen, that's what PTSD is essentially, is you're remembering the moment that happened, which is why you can be 20 years removed from a situation, and if you haven't done the work and it's still in your neurons, you hear a flash, or you see someone do this to put their backpack on, and this motion is the same as a punch, and they flinch, and they're not realizing, their body isn't realizing that that's not reality that's happening. They're living in where they were. And so as far as worse, I don't think I could say what's worse, because it's like, what's worse, getting hit once, or being told 1,000 times a day for 10 years that you're worthless and you're never going to amount to anything, and I mean, literally in the Bible, it says life and death lies in the power of the tongue. And so, like, if I'm getting physically abused, it could be a one-time circumstance or a repeated circumstance, but you get hit once, you remember getting punched, but whatever it is that you hear while that's happening, or even whatever it is that you hear, that is the narrative that you hold on to. And that's what a lot of people are stuck in, is the memory of how that feels. And so then what they'll do is they'll paint a character arc of themselves from that young age. Even people in their, late teens, 20s, 30s, it doesn't matter the time. It's just the general population learns these lies before this age. Obviously, people learn them later in life as well, but it's usually just affirmations of the original lie that they learned, right? So if you learn that you're worthless when you're a kid, you mess up at work and you get fired for not doing your job, you don't go, I didn't do what I was supposed to do, so I got fired. You go, there's another confirmation that I'm not worth anything. And then that's how you approach the next thing and the next thing.
So let me ask you this, for verbal abuse specifically, let's say somebody is in a verbally, mentally abusive relationship
Mm-hmm.
and there's no physical going on. What would you advise that couple, whether they're just in a relationship, whether they're married, what would you advise that they do? And say something other than therapy, because I feel like therapy is very much thrown
Yeah.
out there and it doesn't always work as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you advise somebody for that mentally and then also physically? But let's hit on the mental verbal first.
Yeah. Well, to be clear and transparent, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a specialist in any of those things. So everything that I share is from my personal experience with the clients that I've had. So this is just sort of a disclaimer. I do have to say it's a case by case basis. Like, it depends on the type of verbal abuse. There's certain situations where It's not physical yet, but maybe the man is hitting a door or hitting a wall. And then one day it's not going to be the wall or the door anymore. Oh, and that's not going to be enough to satisfy that anger. And so the other thing is the type of like what is being said like specifically. Is it towards you? Is it towards you? Is it about you? Is it verbal abuse at you about something else? So there's all these sort of questions that have to go into it, but the key would be to understand human psychology, and every behavior has a positive intent. Now, I want to hyper focus on that word intent, because we've all heard the term, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And now what I mean by that is we would have to know what they are trying to achieve by the things that they're saying, and also the position they're speaking from. Usually people that are angry, there's a form of fear in that. So we would have to say, okay, what are you most afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of losing you. And what's interesting is if someone is saying you're a piece of crap, you're never going to amount to anything, but the real truth is that person is terrified of losing you. That is easier to talk about and with than the anger. Because if we're just focused on the anger and the verbal yelling and the shouting, they're doing that because they're terrified. So if we address the fear rather than the anger, we'll learn the truth about the story they believe. And they'll go, where did you learn that? Because most people that are arguing are projecting about their beliefs. And then the other person will respond based off of their own beliefs. And so they're usually, not usually, but sometimes you need a mediator, to sit down, and whether it's couples therapy or whether, they're like, hey, can you sit down and watch us converse? And obviously it's hard because sometimes people will act different when you're in front of someone, but it's like, hey, you guys need to figure out what you're both most afraid of. I'm afraid of getting caught. Of doing what? I'm afraid of looking weak. Well, where did you learn that vulnerability was weakness? Because sometimes it's like every
Right.
time I ask him to share something with me, he'll flare up or he'll do this. And then it's like, okay, for me, when I see that, I go, okay, exposure equals vulnerability, vulnerability equals fear. Where did you learn that sharing what happened was weakness? And so a lot of it would be solved. Now, granted, there has to be a big level of humility and the desire for change. There has to be this, okay, this clearly isn't working. This is not a sustainable pattern. We can't just keep yelling at each other. So either we need to separate because we're not willing to put in the work, or we need to put in the work, and it requires humility. And even just being humble enough to listen is rewiring the story about who your partner is. So if you think, oh, my partner's angry, my partner's this, my partner's that, and you go into learning about them with that filter, you're already starting from a position where you're not going to learn that much about that person. But if you go, I need to understand the truth behind the person who is sharing this behavior with me, because the behavior is just a representation of what they believe, and they must be terrified about something. So let me learn what they're the most scared of.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think myself, as well as a lot of others, I think there's a huge disconnect when it comes to if somebody calls you a piece of crap to what you're saying, but you're also saying they might be saying that because they're afraid of losing you. Like, how does that resonate though? Because somebody might be getting called, a POS, piece of crap, or like, oh, you X, Y, and Z. And they look at that as like, man, how could my significant other say that to me? Like, I've been with them for so many years. I might be married, and we have all these issues because there might be name calling, but they might not ever take accountability, and that's the whole issue. So how does that correlate to what you're saying? Being called that means they're afraid of losing you.
Yeah. It comes down to a lot of the time we don't do what we want, and we don't do what we know. We do what we believe the most in that moment, which is why people who love their families can still be stuck in addiction. Like, I don't love you as much as how afraid I am of myself, if that makes sense. So it's like I can really want this. I was talking about this the other day. I can really want to go to the gym and work out and get in shape while also wanting to eat ice cream and pizza every day. And while I'm eating that ice cream and pizza every day, it's not that I don't want to go to the gym. It's that I want to do this more because potentially I've tied the meaning of comfort to food rather than being in shape. So my definition of comfort will trump the desire I have to get in that shape. So in the same way, I could want to love my spouse. I could want to be in a loving relationship. However, because of the fear, the anger that I have about either myself or she reminds me of someone, and when she does that, it makes me think of my ex or whatever it is, I've heard it all. It just, people, what will people say? It triggers something in me, and I don't know where it comes from. And then they'll say, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Whatever. Or I can't believe you made me do that. Look at what you made me do. Every time you do that, you just make me do this. And so again, the way to reconcile how someone can be abusive in that manner is also somewhere at some point they learned that that was an expression of love. And that's what's sad is like, we work with, and when I say we, coaches, therapists, whatever, we work with people who their family figure, someone taking care of them at some point, they said they loved them and then they got beaten. And so they learned that love was abusive. And so when they're in an abusive relationship, although it is not good, it is familiar, and the familiarity trumps them leaving. And you build this neurological connection that you can't seem to break because of what you've learned about what love is and what love you accept the love you think you deserve. So if you learn that you don't deserve that much, if you learned that, well, love is complicated, and sometimes they want to hug you and sometimes they want to hit you, and I just hope I catch them on a good day. That's what you'll accept.
Yeah. Yeah, because your brain is hardwired then essentially. And then I'll use this as an example. You got people out there that they can't hold or sustain a relationship, and they keep hip, skip, scopping and all that, skippy scopping to every single
Skippy
next
scopping.
relation.
I like that.
Skippy scopping.
It's in the new
It's like,
dictionary.
yeah, for real. Let's create our own dictionary,
Skippy scopping's a good one.
They'll be skippity scopping for, month after month to one partner to the next partner, or maybe it's every 6 months. And they struggle with that. And then they say, oh, well, nobody's out there for me. I've been with this partner, the first quarter, this other one, the second quarter. I've had doggone 5 relationships in the past year. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, man, have you not thought to maybe work on yourself? And maybe there's something hardwired within your brain to reverse engineer a little bit. But I feel as
100%.
if individuals want to always look at the external and look at the previous partners they've been with and say they've always been the problem and never themselves. I feel there needs to be a lot more accountability, I guess you can say nowadays. But
Yeah.
I'd say, one last question here before we kind of pivot on the identity train. Would you say is identity the biggest thing holding people back in their lives and the one thing nobody's actually addressing? Would you say that?
Biased, yes. I think even at some of these conferences and these coaches, whatever, like there is a gap in the industry. There is not enough equipping. There's too much informing. And you hear all the time, like, if you find your purpose, you'll change your life. But the problem is a lot of people have their purpose, and their purpose is based off of their false identity. And so your purpose does not matter and will not be effective if the person who is pursuing it is not you. And what I mean by that is the reason it could not be you is you built this purpose around what you were told success was, around what you were told about how much money you need to make, about what you were told about, taking care of your family. And funny enough, like you and I were both in the network marketing industry. And so we get told, if you don't want to make this much money per month, you are a loser. If you don't want to buy your mom a house and retire your parents and do this and that, you are a loser, and you're not working hard enough and your goals aren't big enough. And why don't you have this and this and this and this? And then your identity gets built around looking like that's what you want, looking like you have a purpose. So people stop asking you what your purpose actually is. And so I think that, again, we are trying to solve internal problems with external solutions, and it's not working. So a fun fact, if you look at studies, the rate of antidepressant prescriptions in the past decade has gone up. But guess what else has gone up? The rate of depression. That's supposed to be an inverse correlation. Then what else has gone up? The amount of money being spent on the self-help industry. So if the amount of money being spent on the self-help industry is going up, that means people are spending money to learn more about themselves. And at the rate that they are purchasing this content, they are increasing in doubt. Which means what? There is a gap in the marketplace. And people are learning what to do. People are learning, courses to buy, investments. They're learning all this stuff. They're learning how to think, but they're not learning how to learn how they arrived at that thought process in the first place. So it's not about your external circumstances. It's not about the money that you make. It's not about anything that you do. It's about the belief system that you're using to make those decisions in the first place. And someone who is solid in their identity and doesn't need to make any of those decisions, and on the outside, it might look like they don't have as quote unquote a successful life as someone else. Maybe they have, let's say, a smaller house with kids or they're single, whatever it is. You don't have to look. If they wake up every day and go to bed every day and their circumstances didn't change who they are winning more than most of the people in this country, in the world, really. And that's why you can also go to other countries and you see, why do these people, we have everything and do nothing. They have nothing and do everything. And then we have this, we also have this false understanding of what suffering is and of what lack. We look at them, they have nothing. Okay. But in theory, they're like, I have a roof over my head. I get food sometimes. I have people around me that I like, and I have music. And that is their basis. And they're like, we're not suffering. You guys are suffering. You guys are miserable all the time.
Yeah, you go to a lot of these other, even like third world countries, and you got these kids that are so happy. Happy is all, today. And then you look at kids in America and they have all these different things like devices, all the reasons in the world to be happy. But then like you mentioned, I mean, you got these antidepressant prescriptions at an all-time high and then depression's at an all-time high. And I'm sure a majority of that comes from the States, right?
Oh yeah.
And we claim to be one of the greatest countries in the world. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, right? We're both from the States, but at the same time, there's also, we have the biggest problems in the world that just, they're not getting fully addressed. I feel that the root doesn't get addressed to what it should be. Let me ask you this. You mentioned about network marketing. And for those of you who are watching and listening, Daniel and I, we met through network marketing way back in the day. And what would you say within the network marketing industry is the biggest lie that people are told? And I know you mentioned about you can achieve all the money that you want, the car, the house, and if you don't achieve that, then you're a failure in life. I think that's definitely a big one. Is you're told to believe that. That's what we were told to believe. I still sometimes feel as if my mentality is that, to where I need to obviously achieve X, Y, and Z. If I don't, it's fine. Not as much as what it was back in the day with doing network marketing, but I feel that a lot of people, especially younger individuals, if they're not a success, then they do get depressed and then they do get anxiety and it doesn't work out for them. And then I feel maybe that's why network marketing does have a bad rep at the same time. So that comes back to, what would you say is the biggest lie in network marketing that people are told?
I think it's the same lie that we learn in a lot of other industries, which is you are worth as much as your achievements and not as much as your qualities. Starting from childhood, we are told what matters. And it's how many touchdowns you score. Because statistically and logistically, that is how you're picked. They don't care if you're a hard worker. They care if your hard work leads to touchdowns. They don't care if you're a good person. They care if being a good person led you to getting good grades. So what happens is we are told that we are the sum of our actions and that we are the sum of our achievements. And so if you don't have a lot to show for, then you aren't worth the show. And so then you just kind of get neglected, and you will be treated in correlation with what you have done, which is why you'll see some of these leaders in these industries, not just network marketing. And to be clear, there's plenty of incredible leaders in network marketing. There's plenty of people who don't believe that, but there were some people in certain companies we were in that were making 100 grand a month, and now 100, 200, 300 grand a month. I'm like, you are an absolute idiot piece of garbage who doesn't care about people. And then there would be people who weren't making as much money, who maybe didn't have the biggest team, but gosh, they were a really captivating speaker, and they could really organize events and bring people together and bring people in community and encourage them. We're like, well, not we, but then they're told, yeah, but once you do this and this, then then blah blah blah. And so then that person gets their joy ripped out because they're told that it's not enough. And then that's how they step into the workplace. And so I think, again, it's this, and for people listening, I've said this before, and this is also a concept that Case Kenny, who I was able to meet a couple months ago, he's a super dope guy. He talks about the language of optimism and all these things, but he encourages, rewarding kids based off of their qualities and not their accolades. So instead of saying, hey, good job on the 7 touchdowns, like, hey, I really noticed how you ran until you couldn't, you showed up early, and you let your other teammates speak. I'm really proud of you for that, because those things will last longer than the sports ever do. Every athlete ends up an ex-athlete. Every single one of them. Nobody has a 100% athlete career. They're an athlete, and then they're not an athlete. And so that's just how it works. And if you're only given credit for your accolades when you are not in the industry where you can earn accolades anymore, for that, you will lose yourself. And so I've worked with athletes before that were performing at high levels, and then they're like, dude, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what I'm able to do because of this. I don't know how to figure out my identity. I don't have an identity outside of baseball. I don't have an identity outside of football. I don't have an identity out of soccer. What do I do?
Yeah, it's true. I think that doesn't get talked about, especially within athletics, because that is their identity ever since
Yeah.
they were small. And then they go playing throughout high school to college to then professional. It's wild. I think that's definitely something that needs to get talked about a lot more within the sports realm. Let's talk a little bit about sports. Let's tie this into your story a bit more. So walk me through the pursuit of collegiate
Yeah.
and professional athletics. What identity were you building at that time? Going through the collegiate to trying to become a professional athlete.
Yeah. So what's really funny is, specifically with golf, I started playing golf when I was 4, and I wanted to be a pro golfer. So I was pursuing pro golf the entire time I was playing. That was always in my mind. So even when I was 7, 10, 12, 15, whatever it is, I was like, okay, I'm going to play in college, and then I'm going to go pro. That's my dream. So I was playing in these tournaments. I was in the Oregon Junior Golf Association. I was in the American Junior Golf Association. I played in Southern California Junior PGA events, whatever it is. And so what I started to do, and I also was playing other sports as well. So golf was the main one. And then when you're a kid, you play everything that you can. And so what was, again, starting to happen is I was starting to build a future that hadn't happened and live in it now. And I was like, okay, once this happens, once this happens, once this happens, once this happens. And so validation from people that had either been pro before or were really good, and they were telling me, oh my gosh, your swing is incredible. I was doing well in tournaments. There was always people that were better than me, but considering how much I practiced a lot, but I also played other sports. And there were people who practiced all year round and I was just as good as them. And so I got through a lot of things, and I have gotten through a lot of things just from natural talent. And I'm not saying that to brag. It was actually a crutch because I wouldn't practice as hard as I should have as well. I'd be like, oh, I can make it through. Even with studying, I was like, I'll study the night before. I have a good retention, whatever. I'll pass the test and XYZ. Anyway, so on this journey to hoping to pursue collegiate athletics and professional athletics, I got recruited into Hollywood when I was 15, getting ready to turn 16. And so, not to get into the weeds on that, but I ended up going to New York for this modeling and acting competition. I ended up winning and then came back home to Medford, Oregon with a career while also figuring out if I'm going to play golf in college. And so then when I was 17, there was a 2-day golf tournament, and we had just finished the first day. It was really hot outside. I was really tired, and I was driving home, and I passed out behind the wheel, got in a car accident, crashed in the only way I could have essentially survived and the only car I could have survived in. Couldn't play the next day, and then ended up booking my first job for modeling for Nike like the next week. And so was a very interesting answer to prayer, because we were wondering, okay, now I have this potential to do this career thing with modeling and acting, which I hadn't really taken seriously at first because I was like, I'm an athlete, I'm just going to give this a shot. Started seeing some success early on. Then we're like, okay, are we actually going to do this? And so, what's funny is even in that journey, it's like, well, now my identity was tied up in finding success in the modeling and the acting world, because the same thing was happening in a different industry. So I have people that are agents that have been agents for 20 years telling me things about myself. You're going to be the next this, you're going to be the next this. And I'm just going, well, you obviously know better. So, okay, that's true. And again, what happens? The longer it doesn't happen, the more you think it's a lie. So the joke, which isn't, I guess, a joke. I mean, it's funny now, but it's like I started modeling when I was 15. I started therapy when I was 16. And so, but it's because now your whole identity and narrative is wrapped up in how you look. And so if it's not your skin, it's your hair. If it's not your hair, it's your face. If it's not your face, it's your body. If it's not your body, it's how you dress. It's how much weight. Like, there's all these different things. And then my whole identity, like, I started working out when I was 13 years old. I've been working out for almost 18 years now. And when I was 16, I'm going to castings against men who are 22, 23, 24, 25. That's a man for me. I was 16 years old. And I'm looking at my body and I'm looking at their body and I'm going, they're so much bigger than me. I'm a sack of whatever. Now I got to go work out harder. So I'm trying everything, and getting in good shape in the process. But it was costing me my belief in myself. And like, even still to this day, not nearly as much, but I had pretty crazy body dysmorphia, where I was in really good shape. And I would just look at myself and be like, dang, I'm fat, or I'm whatever. And thankfully, I didn't get into any of the, I never had bulimia, or I never struggled with any dietary things. It was more of just this belief that I just looked awful a lot of the time, that I was ugly. It was hard for me to take compliments sometimes. People are like, oh, you're good looking. I'm like, oh, you just have to say that. Like, it was this really weird dynamic, So anyway, all of that being said, I had accepted, like, once I knew I wasn't going to play in college, I was like, all right, we're just going to pursue this other thing. And I really enjoyed the rest of my high school season. And funny enough, now one of my clients is a college golf team and a golf academy. I've been playing a lot. Like, I'm still pretty good. What's cool is, like, all of those years I played golf have really paid off. It's opened a lot of doors for me in my life because people love golf, and a lot of ex-athletes that weren't ex-golfers, they go to golf and pickleball. And so, but yeah, that's what I would say. And so I had a lot of false narratives that I was working through growing up, which is why I'm so passionate about what I do now.
Yeah, I can imagine too, especially being in the modeling and acting scene such a young age, and you're going up against these people that are 5, 10 plus years older than you, and you're thinking in your head, "Man, I'll be lucky if I get a call, from these guys."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm not surprised if somebody has body dysmorphia because they're going up against these types of individuals that are freaking ripped, but you didn't even hit your peak yet, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
even today, like, we
I'm
haven't
just
even
hitting
hit
my
our
peak
peak.
now.
Yeah,
Like, bro.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you be working out in the gym, and it's like, I'm sure you just love how you look yourself. I mean, I see your gains just off of the stories, and I'm like, man, bro, like he's really getting ripped and toned, and it's something to be proud of, you know. And but
Yeah.
it's funny how everything comes full circle from back then to here we are in 2026, and it's like, well, clearly the acting, modeling career might not have panned out for whatever reason. The professional sports didn't pan out for whatever reason, but now you're in a whole different element, and you're thinking, okay, God, like I see
Yeah.
what you did here. I see how you
Yeah.
brought it around full circle.
And it
So
worked, things like that. It's funny. It did work out. It just
yeah,
didn't end with appeared success. And obviously it takes you a long time to be able to say that, because I was also in the music industry for 5 years, as you know. And so I look at all these things, and it worked out long enough for me to learn a bunch of new things. And all of the things that I've done have given me such an extreme variety and diversity of how I can relate with people, where I understand not in theory what they're going through, but what they're actually going through, because I've been through it, and maybe not to the extent that someone has been through it, but it's like something not panning out. It was panning out until it wasn't. So the only thing that makes something not pan out is if you decide that because you didn't reach a certain level, it didn't pan out. But now when I'm looking back, like in theory, I did go on a lot of auditions for a lot of big things. I met a lot of incredible people. I was with a really big agency, and it was working out in the sense that while I was pursuing it, it made sense. When it
yeah.
stopped making sense, I stopped doing it, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, you mentioned about the music industry and the entertainment industry, and I think you've always been so talented with your voice, and I feel like any instrument that you've picked up, I've always remembered that about you, and you definitely have that talent within yourself. I've always seen that. So let me ask you this: like, what with you being in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, what did that world do to your sense of self at that time? And then I'm also going to ask you another question. You left LA. You don't
I
live in
sure
Los
did.
Angeles no more. You're
Yeah.
living in Austin, Texas.
Come on.
So what broke and what got
Yeah.
rebuilt during that time?
Yeah, man. What did living in LA do to my sense of self?
Whew, it might be a 30-minute one right there.
Yeah. I mean, dude, Hollywood sucks.
Yeah.
It's a really tough industry. What I will say, by the grace of God, I did not get swept up into any of the really dark stuff. I heard about it. I was around it at times, but I never got in it, thankfully. But I heard about some pretty crazy things. And I think the only thing that didn't make that time of my life worse and more destructive was God. Like if I didn't have a relationship with God, I would have been so far gone for sure, because I would have been my filter. The times when I was my filter, I messed up. The times where God was my filter, I was protected. I was protected the whole time. But when I look back at some of the decisions I made, the people I was around, the things I decided to say yes to that I shouldn't have, you know, your sense of self comes like in LA, you're hoping to meet the next person that will catapult your career. And then what happens is people that look like you are your competition. I didn't have that mentality. Everybody was my friend. I'd go to castings and there's 250 guys that are 6 feet tall, this weight, brown hair, brown eyes. We all look the same. And I'm trying to meet everybody. And some of them were kind of cold, but the ones that were friends, they're like, yo, this is why we're models, bro. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's just be friends. It doesn't have to be like this. And so, but what it does is there is a small, the book Atomic Habits, where it's like 1% every
Yeah.
day that changes. There is a small level of consistent erosion that happens to your character, your worth, and your values when you live in a place like that. Every single day, you are bombarded with things that make you think about going against what you believe. One of the things that I loved about moving to Texas was the billboards. There's no billboards. All the billboards are like for lawyers or, just production or whatever it is. In LA, there are so many billboards there would be massive billboards of a horror movie, And the main thing is just this demonic looking witch. And every time I drive on Sunset Boulevard, I have to look at this thing, or it'd be on the side of a building, or it's some girl with her entire body out. And it's a sexualized city. It's a anything goes kind of place. And there are, of course, there are incredible people that are in it. There are incredible communities that you can find. Overall, as a whole, specifically in that area, it was hard, man. Like, it was a battle every day to say no to certain things. And I said yes to a lot of things that I shouldn't have. And then when I ended up leaving, the guy that I was doing music with at the time just started doing some life stuff that I wasn't a super big fan of. What's amazing is since then, we didn't really talk for a long period of time. It was tough. We were just in very different places in life. And I'd known him since first grade. And since then, he's like completely turned back to the Lord. He's doing incredible things all over the world for the kingdom, and we're good friends again. And so that's a blessing. But he lost everything as well. Like, he lost everything, everything. And I lost a lot. And we both lost things in that season that propelled us closer to the Lord than we could have ever imagined, which was so just a huge blessing. And so at the time, I was dating a girl who was in the military. She was stationed in Abilene. So when I called one of my best friends over here who had been investing into my music, and he's just an incredible guy, I called him and I said, "Hey man, like, I can't do music anymore. I'm sorry. I just can't." And I explained everything. He said, "Why don't you just move to Austin? You can work with me." And because at the time, while I'm doing music and while I'm doing these other things, I'm still coaching, but I wasn't doing it full time. And so, because I was still trying to, and so anyway, he's like, "Why don't you just move to Austin, work with me, and you can do some coaching as well, and start to really build yourself out here, and you'll be closer to your girl." And I was like, I mean, it's not like I'm going to go build a new life in South Dakota or something. And
Yes.
so I was like, "Cool, I'll do that." And so ended up moving out here, and the Lord had other plans in terms of the relationship. And so I actually ended up, my last part of my drive, I drove from Medford to San Francisco, Vegas, Vegas, Albuquerque. My last drive was Albuquerque to Abilene to break up with her in person. And then right after that was done, Abilene to Austin, I woke up knowing 4 people. And I had left the industry I thought I was going to do for a long time, left the girl I thought I was going to marry, left the city I had been in for almost a decade. And yeah, I was just like, "All right, God, like, what are you going to do here?" And this has been one of the most incredible seasons of my life. Like, it has just been, I can't even describe the people that I've met, the way that God has blessed me, not just circumstantially, but in my walk with Him. I've been able to hear His voice more than I ever have, more involved in the church than ever. Like, it's just been incredible.
Yeah, you've had a journey, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Like, I lived in Houston for a year during, the pandemic and everything, so Texas always has a sweet spot in my heart. What would you say is what's your favorite thing about Texas?
Outside of Texas, like Austin in particular, because I'm not a huge fan of Dallas, not a huge fan of Houston. Austin is a city that functions like a town. And so when you meet someone, you will probably run into them on accident that next week. It is the easiest place to build community, and real community. Like, there is literally something for everyone. Like, there's any type of workout group you can imagine, run clubs. The coffee shops are amazing. The walkability is great. Obviously, it's like humid and all these things, but there's just something for everyone. And it's so collaborative and it's so entrepreneurial, and the people just want to see each other win. Like, it's so cool. You'll meet people and they'll go, "What do you do? What do you want? What do you need? How can I help?" Oh, you got to, and then they'll put you in a group chat, and then that person will invite you to an event. You go to that event, and then you meet people at that event that put you in another event. And then, like, I literally moved here knowing 4 people. And after 3 months, including being gone for a month, I already knew like a couple hundred. I kid you not, I think I know over 1,000 people here.
Holy
Like,
cow.
I am not exaggerating. Like, between church, the workout communities that I'm in, the run clubs that I go to, the gyms that I go to, the small groups that I go to, it's insane.
Man. Yeah, they always say it's bigger in Texas too,
It
right?
literally is. It literally is.
Texas has some of the best food as well
Yeah.
that I've ever had. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Houston's food is a little better.
Yeah,
Houston's got a pretty good food scene.
I haven't explored Austin enough. It's just been
Yeah.
more so Dallas for the food, but Houston, like you
Yeah.
said, Houston's
But
definitely got
we've got some pretty banging restaurants out here for sure.
I might have to make a trip down there and see.
Let's go,
Holy.
baby. Come on.
You mentioned church, right? I know you're
Mhm.
very faith oriented as myself. Let me ask you this. Let's tie in this topic and then we'll kind of wrap this up a little bit. So, what does it actually look like to listen to the Lord's voice in
Mm.
a practical daily sense for you? Because you've went through, I feel like, the ringer, going from obviously being from Oregon through the modeling, acting industry, professional athlete, pursuing that, and then being in Hollywood, wanting to have a music career, it not panning out, being through relationships, the girl that you thought you were going to marry, to it not working at all, to coming to doggone Austin, Texas, knowing less than 5 people.
Mm.
So tell me, throughout that journey and throughout that time, and even in today's sense, what does hearing that Lord's voice throughout your every single day walk of life look like?
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast right there, man. What I want to do to answer that question is to equip people on how to get better at it, because that's how it works for me practically. So I want you to think about it this way, where the Bible is like a Google Translate. So the Bible is like a guide. I can't know what the voice of God sounds like if I don't know his character, if I don't know what he would say. Right? In the word, it says, my sheep know my voice. I can't know his voice if I'm not one of his sheep. So I have to learn, is this something? Because we have thoughts all day, right? And when I say hear the Lord, I'm not talking about some audible voice that's booming out of the sky. Some people, they experience his voice audibly, or they say they do. For me, the way that I experience it is when I pray and then I have a heart, I call it like a heart thought, where I get this feeling or I'll hear something, but then I have to weigh it against scripture. And I have to say, does this sound like something God would say? If it is condemning, contradictory, or confusing, it is not the Lord. And so when I'm asking for, and it says, acknowledge him in all of your ways and he will make your path straight. So acknowledgement is bringing him into everything. It's not just doing something and then giving him credit. It's like, Lord, what do we do here? What is it that you have for me here? What can I receive here and do it with you? And so, in order, the way that I hear him practically is anytime, or at least I do my very best. I need, like, even on this podcast, you'll ask me a question and I will, before I talk, I just go, God, give me the words to say. And then I'll start talking. And so what happens is when he starts to be part of your daily practice versus just this reserved bullet point list that you have to check off, you start to experience him more. And if Jesus doesn't speak at 7 a.m. in your truck on the way to work when you talk to him, he's not worth it. And he's not God. And so we have restricted the way that we can experience the voice of the Lord. And you cannot read the Bible and not arrive at Jesus. And you cannot have an emotional relationship with Jesus and not go back to the Bible. Because if all you have is the Bible, you're missing relationship. If all you have is Jesus without anything to substantiate the experience that you're having, then it's just your emotions. But I can pray and I can hear something from the Lord and know it's him because of what he said he would tell me. I will bring you out of the wilderness. Lord, is this my wilderness? What does it look like to bring me out of this? And I think the other thing is, to change the way you hear from the Lord, you have to change the way you pray. And it's invitation. You're not praying to a God that's out there. You're praying to a God that the kingdom of God is in your midst. This is what Jesus says while he's walking around. In your midst means within. So you're praying from already having the Holy Spirit inside of you. And so then I can ask, like, ask and you shall receive, seek and you will find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. We are given so many instructions and directions and promises on how to experience the voice of God, and we just miss it. And so for those of you who are like, I don't know how to pray, or how can I do this more? It's literally just confession, and confession is telling God the truth. And I think a lot of Christians, I've said this before, a lot of Christians aren't. They're scared to tell God the truth. And they'll say, God, I love you, but they don't. So what you can say is, Lord, I know I can love you. I know I should love you. I know that you love me. I just don't believe it right now. So what do you want me to know about that? Lord, I know I'm supposed to trust you, but I don't. That's the truth. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before you have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. I can't attain it. This is what David talks about in Psalm 139. It's one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. Whether I take the wings of the morning or dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, there your hand will guide me. If that is not the God that I'm praying to, then I'm not praying to God. I'm praying to myself and hoping that it makes sense to me. And so the word of the Lord is sharper than any double-edged sword. It cuts through to the soul. So if the words are not cutting, then they're just words. But the word cuts through. And you just have the hardest part about prayer, the hardest part about being a Christian more than any other religion. It is no action. It is full surrender. You do the action because of what's been done, not to get something. So it is a completely different heart posture than anything else. It is full surrender, submission, humility. Those who are first will be last. Those who lose their life will find it. Like, he speaks in opposites all the time. And that's how you hear from the Lord, is by living in that space.
I tell you, we're going to need to do another podcast just on that.
Yeah.
Like, you can just tell the Lord's flowing through you when you're speaking there versus everything else that we just talked about. Like,
Yeah.
that's wild. I mean, I got to rewatch that and just look at how you spoke. I'd say 55 minutes up to
Yeah.
now, and then the past 10 minutes. That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another one there. Let me ask you this: is faith a part of your coaching framework, or is it the actual framework?
For me, it always is. For the clients, it depends. Like, I will always, but think about this. So my whole identity is built around Romans 12:2, which is, do
Gotcha.
not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can discern the will of God. Regardless of your religious perspective, you cannot have transformation without renewal of your mind. It's impossible. When I'm telling someone that, it's biblical for me, it's Jesus for me, it's faith for me, it might not be that way, but I can go to someone who isn't religious and I can say, hey, in order for us to experience transformation, we need to renew your mind. That is a basic principle. But what's cool for me is that's obviously incorporated with my faith. I've coached plenty of people that aren't Christians, and I'll just use the principles of identity work. Like, there's plenty that you can do. There's plenty of ways to transform, because God created our brains beautifully. They're meant to be renewed. You're meant to have these transformations that come from relationship and understanding and narratives and stories, which is why Jesus spoke in parables. He didn't speak in lofty wisdom that nobody would understand. If he's a farmer, he's giving a farming parable. If you're a vineyard owner, he's giving a parable about wine. Like, if you're a fisherman, he's giving a parable about fish. Like, that's just how he would teach. And so he made it accessible to everybody. But he also says, he who has ears, let him hear. So some people, they won't have the ears to hear what's being said. But anytime I'm coaching, they usually will, like, if they're a believer, they usually know that I am because they've been referred by someone who is. And if they're not, they're like, hey, do you use, like, I had someone ask me the other day, do you use religion in your coaching? I said, not if you don't want to. Like, I can still help you,
Yeah.
Which is funny though, because people who are resistant to that is because of a false narrative they have about God. And a lot of the work that I do is actually with Christians and their false narratives around who God is.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Man,
It's
oh
crazy.
man. Yeah, that's insane. But a lot of times Christians are the ones that, like, something I notice, and I know this can go off on a tangent, but like Christians, they'll act as if everything is completely okay just because they label themselves as a Christian and they feel as if they have a relationship with God. I'm a Christian, but you ain't practicing nothing really besides saying you a Christian. Like, you ain't even go to church. You barely stream anything. You think worship from home is the end all be all of worship. It's like,
Yeah.
brother, you have no idea,
Yeah.
So,
And those
man,
are all things you can do, but what we'll do is, like, we'll do them instead.
yeah, I got you.
Those are a both and. Like, we are called to, because obviously, like, church isn't a building. So people are like, I can have church at home. I'm like, the reason you go to church is for accountability. You are
Right.
sitting around other people where you are physically representing the camp that you say you're a part of. And so, yes, you can have church at home. Of course you can, but it's not the only place. And it's what you're doing is you're putting in the least amount of effort, hoping to get the biggest results. Which, if that's how you're living your faith life, I would imagine I could see some similarities happening in the way that you do business and the way you do your relationship and the way you do other things. Because if you are someone who tries to do the least amount of work with the least amount of effort and get the most amount of results, you are going to do that for everything, but you are also going to experience that. So if you limit your relationship with God to watching him online and listening to worship, that will be the depth of your relationship, because you don't know what he sounds like, not because he's not talking, but because you haven't taken the time to learn what he sounds like, which he literally left us the 66 books to do that.
Yeah, literally. And it's funny because it's like, imagine, I'll use this as an example. Date night only consists of your home. Date night is different when you go out to a restaurant and you get served some like beautiful fine wine, a nice grass-fed ribeye steak, and some absolute bomb sides. It's
Yeah.
the
And you don't have to do the
atmosphere.
dishes. Yeah. You don't have to do the dishes. Like, you just go in, you pay, you leave, but it takes more effort and it takes more money. But that root of that experience is beautiful. And to be served, like you're like, I'm going to go pay to get served.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Here, let's wrap this up. I got this one segment of the show. I call it the fast comparison game. So I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you one word versus the other. You're going to pick which one you prefer, and we'll go from there. So,
All right, let's do it.
identity or freedom?
Identity, for sure.
Okay. Belief or behavior?
Belief,
Faith or willpower?
faith,
Truth or comfort?
truth.
LA or Texas?
Texas. LA, weather and geography. Texas, everything else.
100%.
Yeah.
Athlete or coach?
Mm. Athlete,
Logic or intuition?
intuition,
Pattern or choice? Control or surrender?
surrender.
And the last one is asleep or awake?
Those can be the same thing.
Is it a trick
Awake.
question?
Yeah. Awake.
Okay. Awake. Gotcha. I love it. Lastly, I call this the legacy close question, and then we'll wrap this up. So, Daniel, you've coached 1,000 plus people. You've coached 1,000 plus people across every walk of life, it seems. If there's one thing that unifies every single one of them that you've coached, one false narrative that shows up almost universally, what is it? And then what's the first step to finally breaking it?
Yeah. You're not enough and there's not enough. Those are the two biggest ones where it's unworthiness, inadequacy, and there's just not enough. What is there not enough of? Time, money, everything. Not enough of me, which is also how war starts. There's one camp that says, oh, there's not enough of me over there. There's too much of you, so I'm going to kill you. And then that's how war starts. So war is all rooted in scarcity and fear. So yeah, unworthy and there's not enough. And the simple thing, this is kind of like a statement I love to live by, is you are one question away from total identity transformation. That doesn't mean that there is this one specific question, but if you keep asking the questions, there will be one question that completely changes your life. And so the way that you do that, number one, is start asking questions, start asking the hard questions, and get to your origin point of where you learned the conclusions that you live by every day. Think about how often you say what something means. Figure out if what you're saying and what you're doing are getting you to where you want to go. So you do an evaluation of where you're at in your life. If you want to be somewhere different, figure out what different looks like, and then figure out where you learned that. But figure out all these definitions and these meanings and these stories that you're saying, like, oh, this is what this means. Not saying that it's wrong or right. Just ask, where did I learn that? And is it true? And is it helpful?
Absolutely. No, I love that, brother. Where can people find you online, social media, if they're curious about like maybe helping them with identity coaching? I know
Yep.
you're starting to really, pop off on Instagram and social media, having some viral Instagram reels. So where can they find you at?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do, just go to my Instagram. So it's Daniel Schuler, Schulerr. I have a link to my website there where you can book a discovery call with me to see if we're a good fit to do one-on-one coaching. I usually only have a couple slots available for that. And then there's also just access to podcasts that I've done on that on my Instagram as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm coming out with a place where people are going to be able to go if they can't do the corporate workshops, if they can't do the one-on-ones. People are going to be able to pay a subscription monthly to have access to frameworks and modules that they can do by themselves with videos of me explaining how to do it. So that's going to be launching here in the next like month or so. So they'll be able to find that on the website as well.
Heck yeah. No, I love that, brother. I think that's a great thing to offer. Daniel, I appreciate you again just being on the show. And really, man, I mean, the relationship that we've had over the 10 plus years, I've
Yeah.
always respected you as a man, as a leader. I feel like we've known each other way longer and we've hung out a lot more versus what we actually have. We haven't hung out
Yeah.
as much, so it's one of those unique relationships where I've always valued it a lot. I know you and I both have had so much to relate on and
Yeah.
a lot of similar journeys and things that we've went through, both living in Los Angeles, me spending time in Oregon, being in your parents' home, right? And
Hmm.
spending time with them and it's it's been something and I respect you so much as a man and as a leader, bro.
You too, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.